What's up? Welcome to the After Hours Entrepreneur Podcast. Today we're joined by the one and only Pat Flynn, founder of Smart Passive Income, one of my favorite content creators. And this is a backstage pass to what it's like to be part of the After Hours Entrepreneur Mastermind community. I'm going out and finding the best of the best to come in and help you grow your business. If you like what you hear and you want to be part of the next call, go to afterhoursentrepreneur.mastermind.com. That's afterhoursentrepreneur.mastermind.com. All right, let's get into this conversation with Pat, where we're talking about how he's using AI, some lead generation tips. You are going to enjoy this. All right, Pat, take it away, brother.
Hey.
Pat, what's up, brother? It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Hey, everybody. Good morning.
Hi.
Or maybe good afternoon for some of you now.
We just made it. We just made it here on the East Coast. And Pat, again, just so thankful you could take a few minutes to chat with the group, answer some questions, maybe tell us all the mistakes that we're making in our lives. But this is going to be great, brother. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help. I'll go fast. Hopefully you're recording it so you can look back and just whatever I can do. I'm here to serve.
Yeah, buddy. So definitely recording, definitely going to be repurposing this. I'm going to kind of start it off. I'm going to have the group raise hands to ask questions and help us take our businesses to the next level, bro.
For sure.
Cool. So I'll record the intro afterward, but let's get right into it. So, all right, Pat, welcome to the mastermind group here. Excited to chat. And brother, AI is completely transforming my life, my podcast, and my business. I'm curious, how are you using AI with your business today?
I'm using it so I'm not staring at a blank page anymore. That's really the idea behind it, to have a starting off point that's beyond where I would have started without it. I don't want to use it and rely on it. I know some people who are already using it as sort of a crutch, which I'm a little bit scared about. But in general, it is a way for me to come up with ideas that I can then stem off of. So if I'm coming up with titles for YouTube videos, for example, I might describe the YouTube video in ChatGPT and then have some ideas. And I don't use any of those ideas straight away, but they do spur some new ideas or go, oh, that's a good framework. Let me see how I can massage that to make it better. If I am creating a title for a podcast, same thing. If I need a email written about something in particular, I might have ChatGPT come at me with a example, and then I can put my own voice on top of it, right? So that's kind of how I use it. But it is very powerful, and it's obviously going to get more powerful. And so what I advise for most people is, like, as these things like writing emails and titles and all these things that those AI devices are going to do for us become more and more prevalent, as we can see is happening. This is where the relationships that you build and the soft skills really come into play. That's what's going to help you stand out. And this is what I'm telling everybody, from entrepreneurs to teachers to everybody who's affected by this. I have yet to put my own face in one of these things and create like a really cool looking artwork. I think I've seen you do that, Mark. And that's just for kicks and giggles. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, it's something we've been talking a lot about, something I've been thinking a lot about. And actually, my last podcast episode, completely AI generated, just to play with it. The title, the description, the script, the voiceover, the entire thing, fully AI.
Now, did you AI generate your actual voice, like the voice that actually was on there? Did anybody catch you on that? Did they say like, hey, that's not you, Mark, you sound like a robot?
So a couple people did, but most people, because I did AI for the first 2 minutes, and then I jumped in and said, hey, this is the real Mark. And there were a number of people who were like, holy crap.
Yeah,
that wasn't cool. You?
That's cool and scary. So well, are you thinking of how you can completely automate everything? Like, are you trying to go down that direction, Mark, with that experiment, or was it just more of a, how good is this actually?
A little bit of both. AI just in my agency itself is saving me tons of time, tons of money. It's helping my team to be way more effective. And, going into 2023, I really see it as a way from taking myself from 6 to 7 figures, because it's so powerful. And so everyone I talk to that's in the know, I want to get a feel for how you're leveraging the tech, because it's really spectacular. It's really amazing.
One thing I haven't tried yet, but I'm very interested in, is taking a podcast episode's transcript, popping it into ChatGPT or something like that, and then saying, write a 2-paragraph summary of this episode, right? And then those are my show notes. So that's sort of, I've heard that recently, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting idea, because we write the show notes on our team, and that's somebody's listening to the episode and then writing those show notes. If that can happen and be very good at getting a person who lands on a page to then want to click, or at least give a summary to somebody who's listened, then that's nobody's harmed in that, and I think that's great.
Long story short, we're definitely doing that. We're able to write much. We're doing that over here. We're able to write much better quality, much more volume, and it's crazy. It's lowered my cost of show note production by about 70%, 65%. Crazy yeah. Towns.
That's cool.
Cool. Well, hey, listen, we're in a mastermind group. We got some great people here. I want to hear some questions. Bez, I see you got a question here.
Yeah, I have a question, but real quick, I have use ChatGPT to help me write like the cliff notes for a book I was leading like a book read for, and it was pretty good. So I didn't have to write it, or I could modify it. So it did work. So my question, Pat, and I'm a longtime listener for many years, so really enjoyed your podcast and the inspiration that you provided. But my question is, I'm working on launching a podcast, so it'll be my first time. Mm-hmm. And you've been podcasting for a while, so my question is, what would you do differently today? What would be your 1, 2, 3, and you'd be better because of that?
Yeah. So number one, I would launch with more than one episode. When I launched with just one, because it was hard for me to get that episode done. So I just wanted it out there. But of course, when people listen to that, and there's a lot of friction to get a person to listen to a podcast. It's the one thing we struggle with as podcasters, right? It's not like just hopping onto YouTube and then boom, the right episode is right in front of a person. There's a lot of friction there. So we want to take advantage of all the campaigning and the hype that we're building up to that launch. And so to have one episode is sort of like you go to a concert and the band plays one song and they leave. You want to have multiple episodes, and you want to have multiple variations of different parts of you and parts of your brand there. That way a person can maybe get interested in episode 2 first, or maybe 3 or 1 or what have you. And then of course the ideal situation is they then listen to multiple of them. That then kicks off the downloads and the call to actions and perhaps ratings. All those kinds of things are sort of like amplified from there. So I would do that for sure. Number 2, I would niche down a little bit more. The riches are in the niches, as I like to say, and I know it's pronounced niches, but that doesn't rhyme as well. So I would get very clear with a podcast positioning in such a way that a person who is of that audience or avatar cannot help but want to click on this because it is made just for them. And you can always expand outward from there, but especially at the start. And of course, there's a line. You don't want a podcast for 50-year-old women who only have golden retrievers who are over the age of 10. But the more niche you get, the more likely you are to sort of get through that noise and then start there. And then what I would prefer that we focus on is not trying to get millions of downloads right from the start, but how can we get those perfect listeners to then want to interact and engage with us? I find there would be more value in having 100 listeners that then want to reach out to you and discuss things with you, and you reach out to them, exactly who they are, their story, and then that can then carry over into stories or interviews that you do in the future, versus a million people from all across, the entire world, and they may or may not be relevant. So, the Kevin Kelly article called 1,000 True Fans really plays a big role in the world of podcasting, because the voice allows you to make those true fan connections rather quickly versus, a blog post or even a YouTube video. And then of course, production of podcasts is much easier than a video. So those are the things I would focus on. If you could get 100 listeners and know exactly who they are, what they're going through in life, and what their struggles are, you're then able to now have them become super fans much sooner, and then start amplifying your podcast for you with word of mouth and sharing and all that kind of stuff.
Great point. It sounds like you may have read this book, Super Fans. It was written by my guy, Pat Flynn. I'm reading through it now. There's a lot of similarities in what you just said.
It's all right. It's all right.
It's pretty good. Hey, John, you got a question for Pat?
Yeah, I got a question. A lot of questions for John Katsavos. My website's linktree/resilient reboot productions. I've been in the podcasting world now for 3 years. I recently did a quote unquote little hack to kind of simulate more um, fans, downloads. I was starting to think like it was more of a cheat than it was anything else. I was wondering how did you get more earballs and eyeballs onto your podcast so it could elevate you? And another question, just to kind of pigtail off of it, I'll shut up after this, is you said something um, about engagement. I don't know if anybody else has experienced this. Trying to get your audience engaged is like trying to pull teeth. What's the best way that you found to help encourage your audience, your listeners, your viewers to engage, to hit that subscribe button, to download their free email, to
Mm-hmm.
get on to your email list? What are some of the tips that you've used?
So yeah, there's like 8 questions in those 2 questions for sure, and let's try to go through them. So as far as engagement, if you want people to interact with you as far as engagement, like reach out to you and communicate with you, one place for them to go to do that is always best, right? The more options you give them, the more likely they're not going to do it and they're not going to remember, right? So I usually say, reach out to me on Twitter at Pat Flynn. Super easy, and we engage from there as far as communication. Secondly, as far as like a free download, if that free download is relevant to that episode, people are listening to that episode for a specific reason and to get hopefully a specific outcome. If that download or lead magnet is of relevance to that outcome, if it helps them get that outcome, then they're more likely to download it. They often call this a content upgrade, right? You listen to the episode, here's the checklist or the whatever you might need that supports this thing that we're teaching you in this episode. So that's a great way to get people to download, because then it just becomes a very clear download opportunity and something that adds value to them for sure. A lot of people think that when you bring an A-lister on the show, that's going to launch your podcast to the stratosphere. And the truth is, it's likely not going to happen. It's great to get an A-lister on the show, but what usually happens is that person's too busy to even share it. And yeah, it can maybe attract some people who happen to come across your podcast. But the truth is, in order to grow your podcast, you need to get your podcast in front of new people. Oftentimes we think social media is going to be the way to do it. But the trouble is, when you share your podcast on social media, those are people who already know you exist. How do we get in front of newer audiences that don't know we exist? So there's a few ways I like to do this. Number one, I love to collaborate with other podcasters, because those podcasters often have podcast listeners specifically. And they have the habit of subscribing to and listening to podcasts already. And I don't try to go for the A-listers. I try to go for the B and C listers, if you want to call them that, on the tier list, because they're more likely to share. They're more likely to show up. They're more likely to amplify that because they are hoping you do the same thing. So that's number one. Number two, this one is a strategy, if you will, that most of my podcasting students use and use very successfully. So here is the process. You find a forum or a group, like a Facebook group, a LinkedIn group, and you don't go in there and start spamming your podcast, right? What happens when you do that? Everybody's like, who's this guy? Like, we didn't invite them here to do this. So what you do is actually you reach out to the admins or the moderator or the owner of that community. And so you do that and you say, hey, Jim, I love your group here. I'd love to invite you on the podcast to answer just one question for me. What's one thing you wish you knew before you started watercoloring? I don't know. I'm just choosing that at random, right? And you get that one tip. The easy way to get that one tip is to send them to a place like speakpipe.com, so that you don't even have to get on a call with them to record that. You just send them a place to then hit record and answer. And then what's nice about SpeakPipe, you can do this on Google Voice. You can grab that file and then obviously pop it into your podcast episode. Now, you do that with 5 to 10 different groups. Pop them all into one episode. That one episode now contains 10 leaders in the space who've now contributed to a really valuable episode, right? These 10 leaders in the space who, by the way, often don't get love because they're in these forums and groups and are more likely to say yes to this opportunity, right? Because it's amplifying them. But B, what do you think the chances are that they will then, after that podcast episode is published, share it on your behalf in the group? Very likely. Why? because you've given them a platform to look like a hero in front of their people, right? And this is one of the coolest things you can do with your podcast is to offer essentially the microphone to other people. And when you do that, they want to show that off. And what's really cool is now you have 10 different group leaders. Not all of them are going to do it, but many of them will. And now you've gotten into these platforms, into these groups, and it's not you sharing it, it's the founder. So that endorsement comes with a lot of weight. Step 2 or phase 2 of this is you take your favorite person who left an amazing tip in that episode, and maybe they're the most charismatic, or you know that they have an amazing story, and you go, hey, Jim, like that tip you offered was really amazing. Thank you. We got so much feedback. I would love to invite you back on the show. Let's do a full episode together. And they go, oh, of course, this is great. Then they do the full episode. Same thing happens. Now you've given them even more of an opportunity to look great in front of their people, and they're likely to share it. Now you've also built a relationship with that person and can do some amazing things and partnerships from there. So this tactic is one that allows for everybody playing to win. And I love marketing when that's the case, and it's fun, and you get to feature some people. I did this for the first time, but unfortunately I learned my lesson. I interviewed a founder of a group who I didn't vet first. This is why we do that first episode that way. And it was just like the driest thing ever. Like I actually didn't even publish that episode because it was really dry. They were really good at communication on a Facebook group, but not with their voice. So that's kind of why you do it that way. And hopefully that tip helps. It works wonders.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Bro, that is gold. That is gold. That is gold. That's why everyone, you should be listening to the Smart Passive Income podcast. What are you doing? You're missing out, bro. You're missing out, ladies and gentlemen. That was great. Ben, you got a question here, brother?
Yeah, I had a different question, but that reminded me of a question that's more relevant to this specific topic today. Have you played with panel discussions on your podcast? Objectively, you have 4 people come on as a panel. That's 4 people that can share it. Have you been part of a panel or have you run panel discussions? And what's been your experience with that, Pat?
Yeah, panels are great because you can get a wide variety of opinions and thoughts. The truth is, if you bring 4 people on and they all agree, it's just, there's no point, right? So you want to have conflicting ideas. You want to have different points and opinions. And talking about spiky topics is a really, really good thing. I mean, that's something I would encourage more content creators all around to do. We always we want to play it safe. We want to make everybody happy, right? But it's when you plant your flag in the ground and you say something and you believe it, that, yeah, it has people on the other side of it, but now there are more people who can come to your side. And you can have, hopefully, a respectable conversation around that. So panels are great. The hard thing about panels is, there are 4 now voices who want to say something, and to keep it fair and to, you can make it as structured as you want or as loose as you want. But it can be hard you need to tell everybody the rules, essentially. Like, I will call your name when it's your time to talk, kind of thing. And that typically works really well, or else you have just people talking over each other and whatnot. Now, if it is a video podcast, you can have a little bit more freedom because people are there. It's like a person watching is at the table with you, and you want it to be as natural as possible, but you could still have some structures and rules around it. In 2013, I did something called the Entrepreneur Summer Roundup, and that's where 4 of us, myself, Internet Business Mastery, Tropical MBA, and one other podcast, we decided that we were going to do a panel, but we were going to do 4 of them. We're going to host 4 different topics on each of our podcasts with all 4 of us. And it was a fun way. We actually promoted it. We had dates of when our episodes would go live. And we told everybody on each of our episodes, if you want to listen to the second panel, go to Pat's podcast. And everybody go there now and subscribe, because we're going to be talking about this topic, which is, very relevant here on this date. And then we just took 2 days to record 4 panels, essentially. And it was a really neat way to, remember back in the day, there were like blog carnivals, where we would all sort of like link to each other purposefully, mostly for SEO reasons. But, it was kind of the same feel, where we all kind of like, as a group, kind of brought the group to each other's podcasts. And it was really fun. It took a lot of coordination, but it did provide value to the audience. And it also introduced people to different voices and different opinions on things. And each of the topics were something that, were that had different takes on it too, to allow for the audience to make their own decisions about the thing.
That's brilliant. 4 podcasters, 4 panels. Mark and Pat, can I ask one more quick one?
Yeah.
So obviously podcasting's a marathon, not a sprint. Sometimes it feels like it's both. I'm wondering, as someone who's crushed it, have you ever felt like throwing in the towel? What caused that kind of burnout, and what did you do to, continue forward?
Yeah, I think it's like an annual thing for me to want to do that. Actually, it's just very common to, go through that either self doubt or you're looking at the results and they're not as big as, or it's not growing as fast as you want it to, and you always question like, should I keep going? Should I pivot? Should I stop? I think the first there was a lot of hurdles even just getting started. Number one, technological hurdles and just more self doubt and limiting beliefs. But over time, I mean, the big second one was there was a troll who I'll tell the story really quick. They left a really nasty comment on almost every single podcast episode, not just on my own website, but they copy pasted it and posted it everywhere else where I was a guest as well on other people's blogs and podcasts. And I remember waking up and my email was blowing up from my friends saying, "Who's this guy? He's saying like really bad things about you. Do you need any help?" And I did, because I actually quit for like 3 weeks. I couldn't muster up the courage to just get in front of people anymore in that way, and it really hurt. Um, Eventually, a guy, his name is Derek Halpern, reached out to me because he hadn't heard from me in a while from Social Triggers, and he said, "Pat, like, where are you? Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I just don't feel like creating content." This guy was, I'm just very depressed right now. And he's like, "Dude, you're an idiot." And I said, "What the heck?" He's from New York, so he's very straightforward. Um, and he was like, "Every second you're wasting on this hater is a second you're taking away from the thousands of people who want to listen to your show."
Yep.
And we as entrepreneurs always have this weird math, right? Where like one negative comment is greater than 1,000 positive comments. And so it really got to me, but eventually I got back on and was, I always think about now the person on the other end who I might not know is going through some struggle, who might need to hear the story or might need to hear some encouragement. And that's who I'm doing this for. So that was a moment where I wanted to quit. There were moments in 2015 where it just felt like a chore to do the podcast. It's like, okay, as soon as I hit publish, it's like, gosh, I got to do this whole thing again for next week. Like it feels like you're on that hamster wheel, and that's always a hard thing. So that's when I got really involved with a team. So bringing people on board to help me. And I'm at a point now where I can just record an interview and that's it. That's done. Everything else is taken care of. My team goes into Squadcast and grabs the files, and it's a podcast episode 3 weeks later. And we're currently already recorded now through May of this year. And it just feels really good because I still produce every week. But if I don't feel like it, or if I'm not feeling it at all, I don't. But then next week I might have some really good energy, and I might record 4 episodes in a day. I mean, we do schedule them ahead of time, and sometimes there's solo episodes too. But yeah, the production of it made me want to quit as well, because I'm like, oh, this is a lot for not a ton. But then again, thinking about who this is for, am I gonna tell somebody who's drowning in the ocean of whatever they're going through, and I'm on this life raft and I have a life ring? Am I gonna tell them, hey, I would throw this out to you, but it's hard. Throwing this life ring is hard to do, or I've never done this before, or I'm scared this might not work. No, like if you know who this is for, you're gonna throw it out there, and if it doesn't hit, you throw it out again, and you keep throwing out because they're drowning out there. And so that's the analogy I like to use when I think about my audience and what they're going through, so that I can just put my fears aside, because those are just very selfish thoughts.
That's brilliant. By the way, I love that you're scheduled out like 3 months in advance, because that's one of the things I think that gets people tripped up, is by saying, "Oh no, it's Sunday night and I need an episode ready within 8 hours."
Ugh. Yeah.
Be in advance. Another quick tip, I have a client that records longer episodes. They're about an hour and a half. And what we do is we break that down into 2, 3, sometimes 4 episodes. Is like a part 1, 2, 3. So if you're looking for a way, people, to get ahead of schedule, that might be a quick way you can do that.
That reminds me, can I share a couple more tips? Do any of you sell anything? Like raise a hands, like you sell something, coaching, product, whatever. Our most successful sales campaigns have come in conjunction with a podcast that features successful students. And this is so powerful now that in some cases, to help us save time on production and get more sales, we often hand the mic over to a student to teach something that they learned from one of our programs. And I mean, episode 185, I think it was, we featured 3 of my students from one of my courses. And we purposefully chose these people. One, because one of them was much, much older. They were 65 and they wanted to start a podcast. And so they had like the technological barrier that a lot of people could relate to. And we picked somebody else who was just so busy with their business that they quote unquote didn't have time to start a podcast, who then took my course and was able to do it. And then another person who had a travel agency that was like a different part of the avatar. And the interviews were not like this. Hey, Dr. B, tell me why my course was the best course you've ever taken. I didn't even mention the course, but through naturally talking about, why did you want to do this? What were the struggles? What's life like now? Naturally they just go, oh, Pat, well, like, thanks to you, I was able to do this, this, and this. Like, anybody out there who doesn't think they can do it, like, you can do it. Like, I did it, you can do it. I mean, it's the best testimonial in the most organic way possible. That one episode accounted for, because we planned that episode to come out during a launch of that course as well. That one episode we accounted over 150K in earnings from, because and the funny thing was, we had some stories come out of that too. We had maybe a dozen emails saying, Pat, you better pay Dr. B because she sold this course for you, right? You can talk about your stuff all day, but when somebody else talks about it on your behalf, it's just beautiful. And this is very much the Donald Miller story brand opportunity. And we as podcasters should absolutely use our platform to paint our student, our client, our prospect, the hero of the story. Because when they go through that transformation of, hard times, struggle, and then coming out of it and looking better, doing better, feeling better, everybody's going to want to go to the same guide who helped that hero, and that's you. So Story Brand by Donald Miller, if you haven't already. And that's our advantage as podcasters, is to tell those stories in a way that other platforms can't.
And just a side note, Phil, before we get to your question here, which will be probably the last question due to time, is I've been a member of Pat Flynn's SBI Pro community. And quite frankly, Pat, it was partially, I mean, probably in a good part, an inspiration for me to create my community. And I love the way that you've got a ton of courses, but I love the way that you hybridize your courses along with the community support. Because to your point, it's a huge, unique selling proposition. And most people that take courses don't finish them. Spoiler alert. So by putting the community behind it, I think it's a really smart way, and it's something that I've modeled. I'm taking some inspiration from in what I build here.
That's great. I appreciate that, Mark. We have like a dozen courses. We started noticing that people were not completing them, and our job is to help people with that. And when we found out that the community element really encouraged people, and even studies have shown, and I think we all know this, that when you do something with other people, you're more likely to get it done. So we combined our community with our courses. We call them community-powered courses. And like, for example, a person can get access to all of them, but they, more importantly, get access to the pathways through them with other people. So don't go through all of them. Go through these 3 in this order with this group of people. And that's how we're now trying to pivot from where we are now. And the results are speaking for themselves. And of course, like I said, we hand over the mic to those students often, and we let them tell their story. So I appreciate that, Mark. That's called the All Access Pass, in case any of you are interested in that, in that business model. And it's cool that you're doing that too, Mark. We want to try to take the lead in the industry on that, because creating courses can help people, but courses plus community is very powerful.
Well said. I'll definitely put a link below so y'all can check that out. The SBI Pro community, great. Best way to grow your business is to surround yourself with the right people. So brilliant.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark.
Phil, we're running short on time. We got to get your question across, Phil. What you got for us?
All right. Hey, thanks, Mark. Hey, Pat, Phil Anderson, Becoming a Dangerous Man. First off, just thank you so much for making that statement that somebody like you, as someone who's planted my flag very strongly with my beliefs, I do feel I hold back on social media due to trolls. It's still something I deal with. John's on this call. He knows that better than anybody. I don't want to deal with that. I don't handle that very well, I don't think. I appreciate hearing that from you. My question would be, I'm 62 episodes in, all solo. As I pivot and as I've joined Mark's group and he's provided a lot of mentorship, would you encourage or not encourage potentially deleting some of my episodes, as I feel they're more ranty or they're more opinionated and they're not geared towards problem solution. What are your thoughts on, as I grow essentially under Mark in this group, would you encourage maybe deleting some of that, so as I get better, they don't find something that maybe turns them off, or if that makes sense on that question?
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, it's interesting because this is a very common question on YouTube. As a person refines their YouTube strategy, should I delete older videos? And on YouTube, the answer is no, because there's viewing histories. It messes with the algorithm in certain ways, and you just, all your new videos get better and, you know, are focused to a particular audience. But for a podcast, I can imagine that deleting episodes, I mean, first of all, nobody's going to know, right? People who already listened to that episode already have listened to it, and people who haven't found it yet are just not going to know it exists. And so there aren't really any negative consequences. However, I always encourage people to keep their episodes for the purpose of just remembering where they came from and having a person be able to see the history and the growth of a person if they do happen to go back. But if there is something in there that is not you anymore and maybe might discourage people from continuing to listen, then sure. The other maybe happy medium would be to go in there and add or replace the episode with maybe something that has something in the beginning saying, hey, everybody, you know, it's Phil here in 2023. This episode was recorded in 2018, and my views on this have changed, but I wanted to keep this here so you know where I came from. But here, like, stick around to the end because I'll share with you where my views are now on this, right? So you can actually, like, time travel, if you will, in that, and keep the episode, and then it might exemplify some sort of growth in you that people might be interested in knowing about.
Hey, Pat, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Phil. Oh, Mark, you're muted.
Yeah, Pat, thanks so much for joining the group today, spreading your wisdom. That Facebook group idea is like gold. You just kind of blew my mind there. And listen, everyone, I don't know what you're waiting for. Go to Twitter and @ Pat Flynn right now. Go tag him. Tell him that this episode means a lot. Go to Twitter @ Pat Flynn. Shoot him a follow. Shoot him a message. Pat, thank you, brother.
Hey, thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate you. I hope you have an amazing day. And I got to use the soundboard at least once, so thank you. Cheers, everybody. Thanks.
Bye-bye.